Hello, hello everyone. Okay, so I'm mad in the American sense of the word. I'm angry. I'm angry about these wars. I'm angry about these provocations. I'm angry about the fact that we might be on the verge of a continental war in Europe. I'm mad about our leaders who are nobodies because all they do is to follow orders. Mr. Stoltenberg, the NATO secretary, you are a bureaucrat. You decide nothing. You are a nobody. Mr. Nobody. Herr Ingen. Mr. Macron, or Macron as they call him in the Spanish speaking world. Mr. Macron, you decide nothing ultimately. You are a nobody. Monsieur Person. Mr. Sunak, oh, go away. You decide nothing. You are a nobody. Mr. Saltz, you decide nothing. You are a Mr. Nobody. Herr Niemand. Mr. Biden, you decide nothing. They parade you. You are nobody, Mr. Nobody. Miss Maloney, you decide nothing. You are a Miss Nobody, Signora Nessuna. Ursula, you decide nothing ultimately. You are a Mrs. Nobody. Hagen Niemand. Oop. Of course, these missiles in Russia and all that. Oh no, it wasn't NATO. No, he said that, no, not NATO. The Americans have a funny expression for this. They say, "Mi no Alamo." Actually, the medievals had a sentence for this. Excusatio non petita, accusatio manifesta. Yeah. Same thing, just a little bit more elegantly expressed. Excusatio non petita, an excuse, a reason not asked for. Accusatio manifesta. Okay. So, this was a NATO attack on Russia. It was NATO that provided the weapons. It was NATO that delivered those weapons. It was NATO that provided the intelligence as to where to hit and to target. Well, okay, so perhaps an Ukrainian pushed the button. So what? So what? Who ordered to push the button? Who ordered to launch that missile? The weapons were made in a NATO country. They were delivered by a NATO country. The targeting was authorized by NATO. The target and the intelligence provided by the United States was flying around there for hours trying to figure out the targets. Targets identified by NATO. It is a NATO attack. And it is a war crime by NATO. It was a NATO attack. We cannot really say that it was Ukraine anymore. Ukrainians are just following orders. They're just vassals like the rest of us. They do what they're told to do. They have no other information but the one that NATO provides them with. They cannot decide on targets themselves, but have only those that NATO gives them. They have no weapons to attack with, but those that NATO gives them. They have no technicians to operate anything but those that NATO provides. So who is responsible here? NATO. So, okay, the United States, Washington, the White House, they all answer to that corporate, whatever it is that we want to call it, elite cabal, whatever. So we don't really need to hear our politicians and our media telling us about what is happening, all these explanations. You don't need to do that. All you need to do is to go to the source in America, the think tanks, the Brookings institutions, the RAND corporations, the Atlantic councils, and so on. Those are the spokesmen for whom? For the corporate elite, being polite. Okay, so let us examine this. Why is all this happening? I'm mad. Because NATO is failing militarily, yeah? So they need other tools. I'm going to explain it as I see it in detail, okay? So tools for radicalizing Russian society. So they are in this hybrid war, which is really a guerrilla war. They call it asymmetric. Oh, okay. It's a guerrilla warfare now. It's a terrorist war because they have failed. So now they need other ways to continue the war, to continue the fighting. So we are seeing, you know, in the American War of Independence, you had the redcoats, the British marching, you know, the old-fashioned way. And then the Americans, you know, fighting a sort of a guerrilla war. This is what we are seeing now. Why? Why? Because they see no other possibility to neutralize that military victory by Russia. They see no other possibility. They need to destabilize, therefore, the population because they feel they have no other option. There is nothing else left. They have to fight against Russia, therefore, with the tools that they have. And Miss Newland, actually Newland is not the real surname, Miss Newland. She's from originally Jewish from Ukraine, and she calls it an asymmetric war. And before she left, she says something like, "Oh, Russia, you know, there will be nasty surprises there." It's a guerrilla war to weaken Russia psychologically, to damage what they see Putin, the evil Putin. So creating this instability. Why? Because we are losing. So we are going to do things that will hurt them, inflict as many injuries as possible, inflict as much damage as we can. This changes nothing in the battlefield, of course, but it doesn't matter. Let's hurt them. They cannot appear to be winning or to be immune, the government, to all this. And so this has now turned into a psychological hatred. Let's weaken them. Let's weaken them. Let's weaken them. They cannot appear to win. Even if they win, they cannot appear to be doing so. So, terrorist attacks against civilians. The Ministry of Defense, I'm looking at my notes here, the Ministry of Defense from Russia said the missiles were guided by the United States, so US is responsible. There will be a response. Remember Iran, there will be a response. And we will denounce those crimes from Kiev before the international community. Anyway, they made a statement. I found it fascinating that that lady, she is the spokesman for the Foreign Office, I think, or the Ministry of Defense of Russia, Maria Zaharova. She said, among other things, she said something that actually pushed me back a little bit. She said, they attacked on the day of the Holy Trinity. That's Christian talk. That is how Catholic countries used to talk. Russia perhaps being the only Christian country left. And we see the hatred of Christianity here too. But she says we have been noticing this for a while, for a few years. They always attack on these days. Shows a deep hatred against everything Russian, culture. All right. I thought that was different to hear that. They attacked on the day of the Holy Trinity. So what is the objective here? Provoke a reaction. Provoke a reaction. They are losing, so they want to change what? They want to change the coordinates. They want to change the game, as it were, so that Russia will jump, escalate, okay? So that Russia hits something in Europe. Come on, come on. Provoke a continental war in Europe. And they've been doing this for about a year now, actively. What about this provocation? Well, it's a similar provocation as to what had been happening in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022. Provoke, provoke, so that they come on, so that they can attack us. Come on, attack. Continuous provocation for Russia to react continuously until Russia eventually intervenes. Why? Because then you can see, you can say to everybody that you see Russia, they are the aggressors here. And something similar is happening now. Come on, attack. So now then we can say to everybody, you see, of course the Russian government is has rather cold reactions. Yes. They seem, I don't know anything about war, but they seem to me to have a sort of a greater strategic sense, which is not what is happening in the Western countries, which is to provoke Russia into doing what they wouldn't do otherwise, therefore to provoke them to make that mistake. So the Western strategy seems to be, we are losing militarily, no question about that. And since we are losing, then it is imperative for Russia to do something that will allow us to change those coordinates, the rules of the game. That's number one. Number two, attack the cohesion of the Russian people, destabilized. this word asymmetry, I just forgot, asymmetric war. Yes, so, as I said, it's a guerrilla war, it's a terrorist war. But you know, it seems that Russia does not want to enter into a continental war in Europe. So they're doing something else. They're using this asymmetric um, uh, projection too. So now we see them, where are they? They're in Cuba, in Florida, Venezuela, North Korea, okay? Not a direct confrontation in Europe with NATO. So they're choosing other means of response which are not what NATO is trying to get. NATO wants a pretext to start a war in Europe. They have been doing this actively for about a year. So each of these missiles into Russian territory, each one of them would be a reason for declaration of war. Declaration of war. Not against Ukraine, but also against those countries that provide the weapons, their location, their targeting, and everything else. The US, the UK, France, it seems. But Russia has not responded to this, or rather, they've been kind of putting up with it. But now we have the latest provocation. Yes, we publicly authorize Ukraine to use these weapons to hit into Russia. They have been doing this all along, but now actually they publicly and openly authorize them to do so. This escalation is actually making it public now, much more evident. And they are trying, this is what I mean, they are trying more and more to make it more and more difficult for Russia not to react. That's the escalation. Not to react against them. They were always there, they were always sort of more or less hidden, but now it's open, publicly. Let's force them to attack us. Then we'll have the justification. You see, we're not attacking, we're just defending ourselves. This latest offer by Putin, yeah, you remember that. Okay. He knew that they wouldn't accept. Everyone agrees that. True, partly it was in order to deactivate that, what did they call it, peace conference in Switzerland? In Switzerland, pretending to be neutral, yeah. To deactivate this, they wouldn't have needed to do that because they deactivated themselves. But he knew they wouldn't accept. But of course, the West was not interested in even looking at it. Why not? Because as we all know now, this is not about Ukraine. This is about Russia. The idea that Russia might come out of this victorious, or that the Russian government comes out of all this intact, or even more prosperous, more powerful even, this is unacceptable to them. For 30 years, they have been trying to control Russia. all its wealth, with all its Christianity, everything is mixed together, you know. This was the objective. But now that it's winning, now is a matter of life or death, also for the corporate cabal. So they're betting on a game, as it were, till the bitter end. Why? Because they see no other form of salvation for them, for their future, as a group, or even on a personal level. If Russia won outright, what would happen to them and their power, and even to them individually? And what if they were asked to be accountable for what has been happening for the last 30 years? They see no other way to save themselves, their power and their privilege and their eagerness to control the whole world. There is no other way now. War, yeah. Humanity, whatever. Why is it a question of life and or death for these corporations? One of those older oligarchs, Russian oligarchs from the 1990s, you remember when first the United States intervened with the Yeltsin and all that. They paid for his campaign. Okay. And there were these oligarchs who were actually stealing the nation's wealth and putting it into private hands to themselves, together with the West. They were just, yeah, they were actually just stealing everything. And he admitted in an interview not long ago, he admitted that all those oligarchs actually then, well, they continued to do this until Putin came into power in 2000. And of course, he was, I suppose I can say, clever enough not to go against them like that, you know, like a punch, because it wouldn't have worked. Little by little, they start losing power, little by little. And this Khodorkovsky, he was eventually imprisoned and then left and went into exile in the West. And this is the guy who actually said outright like this that they were all working under the direction of the Rothschilds. It's interesting because we all kind of more or less see, but he actually said it and named it. And that is just one part, is part of the elite. They're not the only ones. But as it turned out, you see, what they wanted to do to Putin, he actually reversed it, turned it around, and returned the favor to them. Inverted the stakes. And this explains now the extreme panic that they have. Extreme panic about what? Of what? Well, for example, of this emerging world, of this multipolar world, of the global south, etc. This increasing influence of Russia. Extreme panic about that. Why? Because it is generating the fact that they are losing control of the rest of the world, with Russia being there. The objective was to rule the whole world. Well, it's not working for the great mass of the world. It's not working now with the emerging countries, with the global south. So they lost control of that rest of the world that they have during the unipole 30 years, yeah, from the 1990s until 2014. And it is now crumbling before their very eyes. So they lost all that part of the world. But you see, at the same time, the risk that it might happen also in the West, that they might lose that power, that Russia's stand in politics, ideology, defense of Christianity, all that, that might be increasing in the West as well? No. That people might start thinking that Russia perhaps had a point or something, and they might not be willing to fight Russia, that sort of thing. This multipolar hegemony, this influence, that it might extend to the West too. And this is certainly because they lost the rest of the world, but they certainly kept the West. And this is a threat to the survival, to their survival. They see that they have lost the rest of the world. Okay, they still have the West. But what if the West crumbles too? Not only the global South, but the West. They lose everything. Hence the authentic panic of these elites. This corporate elite lost control of the unipolar hegemony in the world, but kept the West. But they see that this might not, goodness gracious, might not last. Is this possible? And this is where Russia is giving them a run for their money. You say China, China, yes, China the main thing economically, of course. But China, culturally speaking, is a distant country to the West. Economics, yeah, but culturally distant. And so the actual influence, the Russian culture is predominantly Western culture. And so that influence is, as it were, have been transferred to Russia. And so what they're hoping for is a reaction from Putin. I think hopefully before the US elections. I think they're forcing it. And Putin is there trying to put up with it until after the elections. This is what is happening. I have nothing else to say. I would be willing to fight for my country like everybody else. If my country, my culture, whatever is attacked, I would defend it if I could, in whatever way. But if you ask me to fight and go to war and have to endure what could be a nuclear war for the sake, who's going to benefit? Not the country. The American people are not benefiting from it. Their government has been taken over. There are other people who are benefiting. You're asking us to benefit for their sake? Haven't we, humanity, sacrificed enough? The First World War for king and country was about trade and division of empires. The Second World War, freedom and democracy, how many wars? How many people killed in Vietnam? 3 million? How many people killed in Afghanistan? Who knows? I don't know. How many people killed in Iraq? Millions? Syria? Libya? Which was a really successful country, and now they are selling slaves. How many others? For the sake of whom? That's why I'm upset, because I'm not willing to sacrifice Europe and have a nuclear war here so that they can keep their power and they can rule the world. That's it. Vale. Goodbye.